Good morning, everybody. All right, I think that's probably who we're going to get today, maybe with a couple exceptions. Let's take a look at the agenda here. Not too much to do in class. You guys had a good weekend. I think maybe we've taken care of any missing issues, but if there's anybody left who hasn't turned in your vocab test corrections, then take care of that as soon as possible. It's got to be clearly shown you have checked against the key. That's what gives you that full credit, okay? So we're starting a new vocab cycle this week. I'm not going to keep reading through the words like I did once. I don't think you guys need that. So vocab lesson 3 starts this week, which means that sections 1 through 4 are due by Wednesday night, okay? Usual schedule. I am looking at the agenda for Honors English 1 instead of for you guys. It's not going to help anything, is it? Let's try this. There we go. Okay, so still applies on the vocab test. Still applies on new words for lesson 3. Okay, AP Classroom, unit 1. So there is a new assignment to watch the plot and structure videos 3A, 3B. I don't think you get a notification, but if you go to AP Classroom, then you should get some sort of reminder, quote unquote, reminder card in there. So it's not a real multiple choice practice or anything. It's just when you watch those 2 videos by Mr. Escobar, and, you know, 6-7 minutes each, and just do the usual note-taking informal exercise work and submit that by tonight. Okay, so in the Perrine book, you guys did 6 review questions on plot and structure, kind of going along with the type of material that you're watching the videos. That should have been finished by last night. That's checked. So I do want to talk through those. And then there's a new assignment on a short story called How I Met My Husband by Alice Munro. Okay, and that assignment is posted and due by tomorrow night. Okay, and I have you doing like 5 or 6 of this, not all the questions, but that is right there, right? So I have 1 through 6, and that is due by tomorrow night. Okay, it's a little bit longer short story. I think it's maybe around 15 pages. So maybe at least get started on that today, so you don't have to read that whole thing and do those questions tomorrow night. Okay, can you guys open up your documents from answering those questions on the plot and structure chapter? Now, these concepts, especially when we talk about things like just like plot and conflict, they're basics, right, as far as what they are. Go back to the grid here. You've been learning this since you're in 9th grade, certainly, and even earlier than that. But what we want to kind of focus on and think about is how they are used differently and more deep and complex ways in literary fiction than they are in commercial fiction. So let's kind of chat about that as we go. So obviously, the plot is the sequence of events or incidents the original author constructs a story. And skilled authors are careful to present the sequence in a significant order. Okay, and a significant often might mean something that is not straightforwardly chronological, right? So you've learned that plot curve, right? The simple, most straightforward way to write a story is you have an exposition in which the setting and the characters, the time and place are kind of established. You have a long rising action that takes up most of the story. The conflict is resolved in the climax. You have kind of falling action as a result after that, then some kind of neat resolution or denouement, if you want to use a more fancy sounding term. Okay, now, that's a conventional structure, right? But often in literary fiction, you're going to see something that is a little more complex than that, right? It might involve flashbacks. It might involve just a non-chronological sequence in general. It might involve what's called in medias res, which goes back to the ancient Greek epics, where the story actually starts in the middle after a bunch of stuff has happened. You kind of have a sense of, drops back. You know, it's a kind of more advanced form of flashback. Flashes back to something earlier, moves back up to the point from which it started, and then moves on. That's in medias res. It means beginning in the middle. I don't think this chapter actually covered that, but that's a good thing to remember, in medias res. Okay, so references some of the stories here. Here's examples of those things. And the second question was, describe the importance of conflict in fiction. Can someone tell us that, please, with your real human voice? Question 2. Bobby is unmasking. You're on mute still.
Sorry, it's awkward because it's on a different document. I was trying to mute myself and it didn't really work. Okay, number 2. Conflict is important in fiction because it creates some excitement for the reader that they can indulge themselves in. This can be man versus man, man versus nature, or even emotional. It allows the plot of the story to develop and alliances to form or relationships to deteriorate.
Okay, good. What would you guys say is the main type of conflict that you would see in more kind of commercial fiction? You can see a lot of what types of conflicts?
Man v man.
Yeah, a lot of action type conflicts, right? And in general, external conflicts, right? And that moves the plot forward in a really straightforward way. You get a feeling that things are happening, right? And not to say that you're not going to have physical external conflict in literary fiction, but you're going to have a lot more internal conflict, right? And maybe what's actually trying to be done physically or geographically or something like that, while it may be happening, isn't the most important thing, you know, because maybe the character's on more of what we call a quest, right? Like Foster talks about, and he or she is really trying to figure out something about his or her place in the universe, how the world works, who they really are, where they want to be, who they want to be with, or something like that. And that's what the really important part of the story is often about in more literary fiction, okay? So going along with that, I think we have probably understand already the difference, you know, what protagonists and antagonists are. And a protagonist, you know, we're going to, might say is a hero or heroine like we were reading the other day, but it's almost a little bit of a misnomer, right? Because we don't want the protagonist always to just be this completely sympathetic character who is, you know, who comes across as a hero, because that's boring. Like, what does that really mean, right? You're going to have more kind of gray characters. And the antagonist, again, often in literary fiction is not necessarily going to be just a villain or something like that, but it could be some kind of force of nature or feeling of fate, even if you would think about like in terms of Shakespeare and things like that. All right, how about the element of surprise in fiction? That kind of goes along with another concept hand in hand, right? Which is what and how do those kind of work? Your answer to number 4.
The element of surprise is necessary to create suspense, and the surprise often helps change our expectations by twisting them around.
In other words, not much suspense can be created if what's created by the suspense is not a surprise, right? Then you don't really have suspense in the first place. You failed to create suspense. And the way to create surprise, true surprise, right, is to write plot and create a conflict that is not totally predictable, right? Okay. The differences between a happy, unhappy, and indeterminate ending, well, those kind of answer themselves, right? And we are often going to see more endings that are maybe unhappy or indeterminate and don't satisfy obvious audience expectations in many stories. You know, we certainly saw that in Hunters in the Snow. And we definitely saw that in everyday use, right? I'm not going to tell you what you're going to see in the story that we're going to read for this chapter, but it'll be interesting to talk about. That does not mean, however, that literary fiction can't have a happy ending. It's just in order for it to be considered literary fiction, and it's always a matter of opinion, it needs to earn it, right? So when you think to yourself, you know, can I think of any stories that are really good to have a happy ending, but it's not a cheesy happy ending. It's a happy ending that didn't come in a totally predictable way, right? That there was suspense that actually worked. You weren't sure whether it was going to happen or not. It did, but it felt like a deep story. All right, and then finally, artistic unity. Again, let's hear from you guys on that, because that's something that kind of wraps all this together. All these things have to, everything that happens in a story to have artistic unity, what do all those elements have to have kind of in common in order for a story to have artistic unity?
Artistic unity is where everything in the story has to be in some way important to the plot. Like an author wouldn't, for example, describe a character's breakfast if it wasn't important.
Exactly. And maybe, you know, to really get complex or to get complexity in a story, not just important to the plot, but important to the meaning, right? Important to the theme. And that's what we'll get into more and more when we really start to talk about theme directly, which we haven't yet. Yeah, everything's got to be for a reason, right? And the cheap tricks that you'll see is when there's, you know, maybe something that's supposed to be a surprise, ironic twist, but it's really just a novelty, right? Or descriptions of things, you know, just to use a flowery vocabulary instead of it actually being like a metaphor or a symbol for something, okay? But when those do have a function, you know, and you have artistic unity throughout, that's of course what creates what we would definitely call literary fiction. Okay, that's it. So right after that chapter is a short story called The Destructors, and then after that is How I Met My Husband. I think I have the page on the assignments on page 126. Again, kind of a longer story. So videos tonight, stuff on the story by tomorrow night, and we are all good. Okay, happy Monday. Thanks for coming.